Your support means everything. Each like, comment, and share keeps us motivated to bring you the wildest, most shocking cheating stories. Thank you for being part of C4 Cheaters. You make this channel amazing. So let's start. My wife's friend once made a quip that I was fortunate my husband was so oblivious, most men would have recognized the warning signs. In response, my wife Blake casually remarked that some men are just easy. I chose to remain silent, but a month later, I found myself in a courtroom, witnessing the woman I once loved break down in tears. It was in that moment I realized that the supposedly oblivious husband had outmaneuvered her. I never envisioned myself as the type to end up in a courtroom, nor did I think I would be made a fool of. But here I was, at 34 years old, married to Blake, who was 31. We had been together for just over 5 years, having met in our mid-20s when both of us were ambitious and searching for something serious. Or so I believed. Blake possessed an effortless charm. Her outgoing and magnetic personality drew people to her like a moth to a flame. She seemed to have a knack for saying the right thing in any situation, making people like her, including me. In contrast, I was more reserved and dependable, focusing on financial responsibility and future planning, while Blake embraced the moment. Initially, I thought our differences complemented each other. However, I soon came to realize that such harmony could only exist when both parties respected one another. One evening, during a casual dinner with Blake and a couple of her friends, I stumbled upon a harsh truth. We were seated in a cozy restaurant with dim lighting and overpriced dishes, enjoying a night out. I had been working diligently to secure a promotion, while Blake had been indulging herself more often, something she would laugh off whenever I raised an eyebrow. I didn't want to scrutinize her spending too closely, but a nagging feeling persisted in the back of my mind. As the evening unfolded, the conversation shifted towards relationships. One of Blake's friends, Sienna, who had recently gotten engaged to a wealthy tech entrepreneur, lightheartedly remarked in a drunken haze, "You're lucky your husband is so dumb. Most men would see the red flags." The laughter that erupted around the table felt like a punch to the gut. Blake, with a smirk on her face, responded nonchalantly, "What can I say? Some guys are just easy." My heart sank further as I forced a chuckle, pretending to be too inebriated to care. But internally, something within me snapped. That night, after Blake fell asleep, I did something I never thought I would. I began to investigate. I meticulously examined our joint bank accounts, searching for any inconsistencies in withdrawals. As I reviewed her credit card statements, I noted unusual spending patterns, but nothing overtly suspicious stood out. However, when I checked her private savings account, I discovered a troubling pattern. Over the past 6 months, she had been transferring money into a separate account. Initially, I told myself that she was saving for something private, perhaps even a surprise for me. But deep down, I knew better. She was preparing for something, and I was determined to uncover the truth. That night, sleep eluded me. Lying next to Blake, I felt as though I was sharing a bed with a stranger. Her remarks from earlier replayed in my mind, and I realized she had mocked me in my face, assuming I would never catch on. By morning, I had made a decision. I wouldn't confront her. I would outsmart her. I meticulously gathered evidence, downloading 6 months of bank statements and highlighting every transfer to her private account. The amounts were initially small, but they escalated over time, revealing spa treatments, designer clothes, and weekend hotel bookings during times when I was away for work. The thought churned my stomach. Was she preparing for a divorce? Or had she already moved on? I checked security footage from my doorbell camera, confirming that Blake had left alone for those hotel stays and returned alone. Although I found no definitive evidence of infidelity, the financial secrecy was alarming. She was clearly planning something, and I was determined to ensure it backfired. Seeking guidance, I consulted a divorce lawyer to understand my options. I learned that any money she had secretly moved during our marriage could be classified as hidden assets, meaning I could reclaim those funds during the divorce. I decided to file first. This would give me the upper hand. I acted obliviously, pretending not to notice her extravagant spending, and even hinting at moving money into a joint investment account. Blake relaxed, believing she had me right where she wanted me. When I received a promotion at work, which came with significant salary increase. I knew Blake was thinking she could leave me and take her share of my newfound success. However, unbeknownst to her, I had already filed for divorce. The morning after my promotion, Blake was all smiles, showering me with affection while my lawyer was submitting the divorce paperwork. My filing included evidence of her hidden transfers and claims of financial misconduct, aiming to protect my assets. 2 weeks later, Blake received the divorce papers and confronted me, furious and incredulous. I remained calm, explaining that it was time to end things. She resorted to every tactic in the book, crying, screaming, and threatening, but I stayed composed. In court, her confidence crumbled rapidly. Her lawyer argued for half of our shared assets, but my lawyer presented documented proof of her financial misconduct. As the judge reviewed the evidence, it became increasingly clear that Blake had been siphoning money while I covered most of our living expenses. The judge's demeanor shifted as she informed Blake that her claims had drastically changed. Instead of receiving half of our assets, she might owe me restitution for her actions. By the end of the case, Blake lost all rights to my money. She was ordered to return a portion of the hidden funds and pay her own legal fees. I left the courtroom feeling liberated, with all my assets intact, while Blake sat there stunned and humiliated. In the aftermath of the divorce, Blake could no longer afford the fancy apartment that had once been her pride and joy, as I had been covering most of the rent. Her luxurious lifestyle unraveled, and her reputation suffered. Friends began to distance themselves, and her family was furious over her attempted manipulation. She quickly became the subject of office gossip, having boasted about her plans to leave me only to find herself on the losing end. Weeks later, Blake reached out via email, asking to talk. I didn't even bother to read it. Instead, I replied with a single sentence. You should have seen the red flags then. I blocked her for good. People like Blake often underestimate their opponents, assuming they're the smartest in the room. However, sometimes the quiet ones are watching closely, and the seemingly oblivious can be far more astute than they appear. In the end, she thought she had played me, but it turned out she had played herself, and I walked away with everything.